Hello and welcome back to the Red Brow Project. I am Renee, your host. I was going to say co-host, but I'm going solo tonight. So I am your host tonight on the Red Brow Project. And we are so excited to introduce you to our amazing Red Brow guest. I already feel like it's already full of so much energy and creativity and just good vibes. So loving this episode already. Welcome to episode number 83, where we are going to sit down and chat with Amanda Cefaratti. She's going to tell us a little bit about where she comes from, what her journey is. We're going to talk about her creative process, how she got there, and just her own personal journey. And I loved chatting with you, Amanda, and kind of getting to know you a little bit more. So I knew I had to invite you to be on the Red Brow Project because our guests are going to love you. So welcome to the Red Brow Project.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about where you're coming from and part of your journey and kind of what you do?
So I am from Connecticut. I was born and raised in Connecticut, and I actually decided to move, out of state for college, and that was a really big decision for me. And so to move away from my family, it doesn't seem like Connecticut to Massachusetts is a big distance, but it really is for me. And so when I moved,
anytime you move out of the house, though, when you're coming from like high school to college, I mean, even if you're 20 minutes, I was 20 minutes down the road. I mean, it's still a big deal.
Yeah, so it was a big deal. And my family is the type of family where we're all on top of each other, texting each other, like especially my extended family all the time. My mom is one of 6 kids, so there's just a lot of people and a lot of things happening. And so when I was in college, I was a history and global studies major, and I liked it, but I couldn't really find my niche. And so one day my residence hall director looked at me when I was an RA and he said, this is a job, right? Like I get paid to be here. And I was like, I never thought of it that way. So that's actually how I found myself changing my entire planned career path about, less than a year before graduation. And so I went into higher education and student affairs, moved further from home to Merrimack College for an accelerated graduate program there. And I absolutely loved it. And I loved that area. I loved being close to Boston. I was close to some other family up there, so I wasn't totally away from family. But then, my sister was engaged, and then eventually she found out she was pregnant after she got married. And my little niece was coming, or I didn't know it was my niece at the time, but my little niece was coming. And so I decided that it was time to come back home. And so I moved to Eastern Connecticut State University when I accepted my job here, almost, a full 5 years ago at this point. And so I've been here ever since. I'm on year 4. And that's kind of how I wound up back in Connecticut and circled me around. But I learned so much along the way. And one of the things I learned was that if I'm not expressing myself creatively, I get very stuck. And so it makes me very anxious or whatever the feeling might be at the time. So in my first year working here at Eastern, I was super overwhelmed. It was a huge change, my first professional job. So I wound up discovering through a paint night at a friend's house, just a casual one. We were doing virtual paint nights online before they were cool, I guess. And I wound up discovering, 4 years ago that I really liked to paint. And I had never been into art. Like I always liked crafty things, but I was not the artist. I have friends who are like amazing artists, like the kids who had all the things in the art show in school. And that was never me. I took a couple art classes in college, but I just fell in love with painting, and it relaxed me in a way that I couldn't even begin to describe. And eventually I started running out of space to put all of my paintings, and my family and friends all had so many. I think my mother has like 7 of my paintings, like my early ones that are kind of bad, in her house still. And so eventually my sister was the one who pushed me to start selling them. So I sold them at a craft fair, and it was crazy how fast they went. And I was just so excited. So eventually, after years and years of doing that, I've been selling my art for about 3 years now. This past year in 2020, for some reason, I decided it was the year to open an Etsy shop.
Yeah.
So I opened up my Etsy shop and somehow also fell into the world of digital art just through connecting with other artists, especially on social media. Social media is, can't always be the best thing, but for me, it's been one of the most amazing things. And I've loved, creating content, producing content for my art, but also connecting with other creators through social media. TikTok is the most amazing art community. Who would have thought? So that's kind of how I got to where I am today. And the long-term goal was eventually to be my own boss one day and, do my art career or a social media related career full time. but just kind of progressing and looking for that next step as the shop kind of builds and grows.
Oh my gosh, Amanda, that is so cool. There's so much there. First of all, I just want to congratulate you just on being so courageous to take so many first steps. I don't even know if you realized that when you were sharing your story, but you had the first step of moving away from home. And then you had the first step of moving even farther away from home. And then you had the first step of switching gears, like in your college journey, and then you had the first step of putting your art out there in public when you were just kind of making it as a release. I mean, these are all huge things. And then opening an Etsy shop in the middle of a pandemic, which here for online. So that's the one thing that has gotten us through this past year is all of the online connection and Zooming and pushing people to open these online shops that maybe they would have never ever otherwise had the time to do or the desire to do. So I mean, that is a super grateful thing, which is a great question. Do you feel like you got a little bit of a push from this past year, just the way it was with kind of having more time on your hands maybe, or being less apt to kind of travel around?
So I definitely was. I kind of discovered what I would say is like my style of art through the pandemic. It was actually right at the beginning of like lockdown. At my job, we tend to categorize into like lockdown versus like generalized pandemic social distancing. So when we were in severe lockdown was when I kind of discovered this like abstract floral style that's kind of become my niche a little bit, and even just like for actual paintings and also for prints of digital art. I discovered that I really loved digital art during kind of lockdown and was able to do it and kind of dip my toes in that way. And that's when people started like going crazy for things. And they were like, I sold it to one of my coworkers, and then it was my other coworker wanted it, and my other coworker wanted it. And then her friend asked her where she got that when they were having, Zoom happy hour. And so it was kind of almost like the exposure really tripled. I don't even know if I had more time because I was doing so much more, but it was one of those things where it's like, if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. Yeah. Doing art takes so much time. And to be honest with you, I should probably be charging more for it. But like when you start out, you have to, give it away for a little cheaper. One, you can start raising your prices once you have a significant client base. And so, but it doesn't feel like work. I spent a couple of hours like on a piece that normally I probably wouldn't have spent that much time on the other day. Like I was sitting there adding little tiny details, and I was like, Amanda, nobody's gonna notice this but you. But I was having so much fun that it did not even matter. I was like, it's having so much fun putting in the little white highlights. I was like, why are you doing this? And I was like, what the heck else am I doing? It's a rainy day. So it's kind of those little things that I think really, the pandemic is a weird time to decide to make a big life decision, but everybody was online so much more. So it seemed like a good time to open an e-commerce shop.
100%. So for sure. And so kind of to rewind just a little bit though, with your first kind of shift when you graduated, you went into a completely different career path than you thought you initially were going into. When you shared with your family and friends, what was that like for you? And how did that look like?
I've only recently convinced my family and friends that I'm not still in college. My 5-year reunion for college was supposed to be this year. And so I have only recently convinced them that I am not in college. When I was in grad school, it was very difficult to convince, like my sister kind of understood because she didn't live on campus at college, but she had, only graduated college 4 years before me. So she very much understood that like, there were people who were working there doing different things that had to be paid eventually for something. And so, my dad went to college when I was in college. He went back to school, and my mom only has her associate's degree from community college. And so she never had that on-campus experience. So it was really difficult to explain to my parents. Well, the day they helped me move, I think was like when they started to get it, when they were like, oh, you live here, but you work here also. Like it's like when I was in grad school, they're like, oh, it's a grad school thing. Like you're doing it for the free grad school. We get it. And then when they helped me move into my apartment here at Eastern, they saw it was like it looks like a real apartment. It doesn't look like a res hall room. There's no bed with mattress that's this thin, like there's real furniture in here and stuff. And, the apartment I'm in now, even more so, is pretty good sized and very well furnished. They were like, oh, you have a walk-in closet, you're an adult, okay, we get it. Like, it was, they kind of needed the visual cues. My family still asks me how's school. My 93-year-old grandmother, who's super, super Italian, like pretty much off the boat Italian. She says, honey, how's school? I say, Nani, it's great. Sometimes it's not worth explaining. But now that my family kind of understands my career path a little more, they can help me explain it to other people. And so when people ask me what I do and I don't think that they have a good grasp of the higher education system, I basically tell them that I'm in charge of about a building of 250 students, making sure that everybody is happy, healthy, going to class, paying their bills, and having fun.
That is a big job. I mean, 250 students, that is pretty awesome too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's just my direct supervision, obviously. And then there's different groups on under my semi-direct or indirect supervision on campus. But, obviously when you're on call, the on-call thing is still hard for people. I kind of am like, think of it like a doctor. Like, you can't go anywhere because you might have to go to work, except for I really can't go anywhere.
Yeah. So it's kind of like you have always had just this kind of type of certain bubble you had to live in anyhow, pre-COVID.
Yeah. So the higher education bubble, as you probably know, is definitely very niche. And so I started living in it my junior year of college when I decided to go to grad school for higher ed and started looking into it. I just kind of took everything I had and I went to college for. And the reason I went to Assumption College and was like, well, or Assumption University now, and just kind of threw it in the air and was like, I guess we'll figure it out as we go.
Yeah, and that's totally the attitude. I mean, sometimes you just have to dive in and figure it out as you go, as scary as that is.
Yeah, it was definitely a jump in with both feet type of thing, because you can't go to undergrad for it. There's no advising. There's no there's no set person to guide you. There's a couple websites and hopefully you find some people that you're like, hey, I think I might want to do this. And then you can have them help you. And I'm so thankful for folks that were like, hey, you should look into that if you want to do higher ed. And, just kind of poking me and nudging me different ways, because it's really allowed me to shape my career because of it.
I love it. So cool. And I mean, another one of your parts of your story, I love so many parts, but is that were you surprised when you discovered your creativity, when you kind of started with the painting with the friends and then you were leaning into it to see what else you could do?
Yeah, so none of my friends were great people, but none of us were incredibly artistic. But my friend Caitlin, her husband is incredibly artistic. He's a graphic designer. And so we borrowed his art supplies for this paint night. And so he came over out of his little man cave on our ladies paint and sip night and was like, oh, Amanda, that's pretty cool. And I was like, oh, thanks. And I didn't think anything of it. And I wouldn't say that mine came out the best either. That's the best part. But I realized that I kind of had I had the knack for it. It was easy. One thing I've always really enjoyed is doing my makeup. I'm actually not wearing any extravagant makeup today just because I was checking students out of rooms all day and knew I'd be running around sweating. Yeah. But makeup is something I've been really well known for kind of in my family and my friend group. And so I have a pretty steady hand. And so that was something that I think I picked up naturally. And I've always been really into writing. I always thought if I was going to do something creative, it would be writing. I've loved writing since I was in first or second grade. I found a book of old papers that my dad gave me that he had saved. And it was notes from my teachers in second grade talking about how much I loved writing and how much I excelled at writing. So I always thought that would be where I wound up making my creative break. But apparently, every single time I've tried to write a novel for the past 5 years, it wasn't the place, and painting was the place.
That is so cool. And I mean, I think that a lot of people sometimes they think if they weren't just kind of born being able to sculpt something or make this amazing painting or draw somebody's character to scale, that they're not creative. And I mean, we talk about this a lot with our guests, that creativity comes in many different ways. And I mean, we use our creativity every single day, whether we realize it or not. What are we going to make for dinner tonight? How am I going to make sure to, reach all of these students in the matter of time frame that I have and be here in the next 5 minutes? I need to creatively come up with a solution. And And so like, there's so many different ways we use that creative process. But to kind of find that niche and hone in on it sounds like it's really cool the way you came about it.
Yeah, that was something that like I always knew that I was a creative person. I've always enjoyed like crafting.
Yeah.
And so I knew I could follow directions really well. I was like, if you give me the directions and I can watch you do it first, I can teach myself how to do anything. I call myself the Amanda of all trades because I can teach myself how to do almost anything. You know, I taught myself how to do difficult formulas in Excel, having very little Excel background. And I also taught myself how to paint, you know, a Bob Ross painting. And I actually started painting through those like Bob Ross type of tutorial videos on YouTube. This woman called the Art Sherpa, look her up if you're ever interested in learning how to paint. I promise you can paint even if you don't think you can. I've even taught children's classes pre-COVID, like little kids' birthday parties. She has like little kid versions. She calls them little brushes. I promise you can at least do those. And so I really have her to kind of thank for my art journey in the beginning of it, and Bob Ross and people like that who decided that they were going to put this content, you know, online or on TV or whatever. I remember, you know, people like my mother used to like have Bob Ross on in the background while she like folded laundry sometimes or whatever. And it was so soothing. And that's how I feel painting all the time. And I think my favorite thing that I learned from starting to paint is that walking away and coming back with a fresh eye to something, even for 10 minutes, changes your entire perspective. I paint with acrylic paint, and acrylic paint dries really fast. So if you don't like something, you could just let it dry in 5-10 minutes, not even, and paint over it. And so I actually use a blow dryer on a cool setting to dry paintings faster when I don't feel like waiting for them to dry in between layers sometimes. And so sometimes I'll be like, I don't know if this is coming out. And so I'll blow dry it. And then I'll be like, okay, I'm going to go like wash my brushes out or like change my paint water or grab a snack or whatever. And then I'll come back and I'll be like, oh, that's fine. So it really just like when you get so deep into something, it forces you to step back. And that step back perspective has really influenced my whole life as a result, I think.
That is such good advice. Just step away for 10 minutes, come back, go at it again, and maybe you will have a fresh perspective. And I think, you know, if you're frustrated with something, that often helps with you to kind of relax and calm down too. Like if, you know, you're trying to work on a project or put together something from IKEA or whatever it may be, and you're like, I need to like just walk away and come back. And then you're like, oh, I didn't see that here, because sometimes we're so deep into looking at what we're looking at in front of us, we may miss, you know, that other perspective you talk about. I love that piece of advice. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's kind of how I work through fear, I would say, is that like I have to confront it. And you know, usually like talking it out with somebody, or in like in an art case, it's usually my brain, my own brain. I'm talking it out with myself. I'm like, okay, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna step back, and then we're gonna come at it this way. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna paint over that part. I'll redo the background, and then I'll redo her arm because it looks a little janky or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I choose to approach things, because I know that as a pretty anxious person, but also a very solution focused person, that when I can make a list or put things under my control, immediately I already feel better. And it's, even though if it's something out of my control, I can still, there's always something I can do for me.
Amanda, you're able to identify so many of your strengths and just your own inner perspective as well. Have you always kind of had that natural way with yourself, or is that something that you've learned along the years?
I think it's definitely something I've learned. I've always been that friend that people would come to for advice or whatever. And I'd always joke with my friends, like, why do you come to me for relationship advice? Like, I'm the last person you should be talking to, like single as a Pringle. And they're like, you just are easy to talk to, and you're an easy person to, you know, say things back to. I found when I was an RA, the same thing. Students love to just like chit chat with me. One of my favorite things is when my RAs or my students just drop themselves in my office and they're like, on the comfy blue couch, they're like, oh, I need to vent. And I'm like, hit me, like, what's going on, tell me about your life. And I kind of just, I don't even have like set things that I say back to them. I just like enjoy absorbing it and like helping guide them through it. And through kind of my mental health journey, which is something that's been really important to me, I learned to apply these tactics to myself, because I learned that I was doing all of this for other people. And as somebody in a helping profession, we get very like,
yeah,
no time for us, no feelings for us, no cutting ourselves slack kind of personality tendencies to a fault at some point. Like it goes beyond being helpful and, you know, being humble and to, okay, you're a disaster. You can't help other people if you're a disaster.
True.
And so that's something that I've definitely learned, I would say, in the past 2 or 3 years, to really give myself the credit and recognize the strengths in myself. Also, I think it's something that I've had to recognize a little bit at the very least, because it's something that I didn't realize you would really need while job searching. And it was something that grad school really prepared me for. Everybody knows the question, tell me about your strengths and weaknesses, but you don't really think about your true strengths. Like I could tell you I'm good at paperwork, and that's really great. First of all, I'm terrible at paperwork. Second of all, that's not really what helps you get to know me. Like my, you know, previous boss can vouch for the fact that I was good at paperwork, but can they really vouch for my charisma or my ability to connect with students or things like that? So that's really where I decided that I wanted to focus when I was in grad school, and they told us to really dig down and think about our strengths and weaknesses and do things like Strengths Quest or the Enneagram or, you know, different tools like those.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Have you, and I mean, what a relief to know that, I mean, when you look back on where you were prior to 3 years ago and just the amount that you would carry on your shoulders, so to speak, and not be aware of it, and now to where you are today. I mean, isn't that just like a breath of fresh air for you?
It's kind of unbelievable. I was actually, you know, just, I was chit chatting with my therapist as a joke the other day. I texted her and I was like, you'd be so proud of me. You know, I just told somebody no, and I wanted to do it like genuinely, but I knew I didn't have the time. So I was like, no, I can't help you, but this is the person who can, that's not me. And it was like a really big ask too. Like, and I knew it took this person a lot to ask me for the favor. So the guilt was already inside of me. I was like, a family member is asking me for a favor. What am I supposed to do? I can't let them down. They've done so much for me. I was like, actually, I'm, you know, work my business. Like I have a lot going on right now, and it's closing season at work. And that's, you know, our craziest time of year, COVID or not, these buildings are getting closed down for the summer and then reopened for the summer. So I was like, I just really don't have the time, but you know, so-and-so, I think you really like them. And, or if you want to circle back to it in like June when I have a lot of free time, please let me know. And they were so understanding, and they were like, oh my God, this can wait till June. Like, don't worry about it. And I was like, oh, perfect.
I love that. I mean, oh my gosh, so many of us are afraid to say no. And I was going to ask you that, you know, is there anything that you can share as a piece of advice to others that may be struggling with learning how to set boundaries and learning how to say no, just in dealing with the guilt?
The guilt is something I definitely still struggle with. And the guilt is something that I don't know if I'm the best person to give advice about, but when I'm trying to talk myself into it, I think about, is this person going to hold this against me for the rest of our life, friendship, whatever? The answer is probably no. The answer is they're probably going to forget about it in 3 days or less. And if it's really bothering you, you can go back and secondary apologize if you want to. And I find that giving people like that secondary resource is usually a good thing. It's a tactic I stole from like a self-care and in the workplace thing that we used to do with students. Was like, I can't help you right now, but I know so-and-so can, or maybe you should check out this website or whatever. A lot of times with students, when you leave, especially like a student who was in distress, but you know, they're not in like serious distress, they need to like go to the hospital, but you know, they're still struggling. You feel really guilty about leaving them, and you want to know that they have some closure, or you want to have some closure with the incident. And so I tend to, you know, shoot like an email to a student afterwards as like a follow-up and be like, hey, you know, a student had mentioned they really liked painting, but they didn't want to bring all their painting stuff to school. So I was like, oh, look at this cute painting set that I bought off Amazon. That's like super portable, like this cute little watercolor set. It's like less than $20, totally worth your money. Like you should look into it so you don't have to haul all your stuff here or whatever. Like stuff of that nature, of like sliding them a secondary resource, tends to really show people that you do care about them, but maybe that you just truly don't have the capacity to do it. Also, when I try to like tell myself if I can say no to something, I try to think, okay, if I say yes to this, what am I giving up to do this? And like sometimes it's like a nap and I'm like, okay, I'll be fine. And sometimes it's like dinner with my friends and I'm like, okay, I'll be fine. And sometimes it's like the one time in the next 3 weeks I'll get to play with my niece because she goes to bed at 7:30 because she's 2.5 years old. And I'm like, no, I'm going to stay home. I'm going to stay home. I'm going to do it. It's going to be fine. Or, oh, I'm giving up a half a tank of gas and a lot of tired driving back and forth from, home to work or whatever. And so those are kind of the like negotiations I have to have with myself when I'm really struggling with something. And also I think something that I really struggled with in the past that I've gotten a lot better at is not over explaining myself on why I have to say no. I think especially as a woman in the workplace, I feel like I have to constantly validate or like inform people that like I deserve to be here, and just because I'm tired or need a break doesn't mean I'm bad at my job or whatever. And so when I took a couple days off recently with the impending doom of the residence halls closing and knowing I couldn't take time off until the year was over essentially, and I was like, Amanda, like you can wait 3 weeks. And then one day I was like, Amanda, you cannot wait 3 weeks, and nobody is going to think less of you if you take a couple of vacation days because you need them. Like you will regret it so much if you don't do it later. Like you've been there and you've been like, Amanda, you can't take time off now. So you lost, like you're done for, you're at rock bottom. And being able to see rock bottom and be like, I'm going to go this way instead was definitely something that took intense amounts of courage. Shauna is one person who was like, you go take that break. She kind of had to like text message, yell at me almost like kind of like a mom of like, hey, you do what you have to do for you. And it was, like your aunt telling you that what you were doing was okay and reassuring. And I think everyone kind of needs the cool aunt in their life, like Shauna is to me, to be able to, even if you don't talk to them every day, talk you into things and be the person you trust to say, am I taking this too personally? Or do you think this is a bad idea? Or do you think I'm crazy if I do X, Y, Z or whatever and change my whole career?
Yeah, absolutely. Having that cool aunt or cool sister or that sounding board, that friend to kind of bounce that off of sometimes is just a good source of, I'm not crazy. I got to keep it in perspective and it's going to be fine. But I think the way you ask, what am I giving up if I say no, is a really simple way to kind of put it right into, is it worth it? Am I going to miss what I'm saying no to, or am I going to come around and that's going to be fine later? That kind of takes everything else out that you would be thinking of or considering. So yeah, so good. I feel like I can just keep picking your brain for all these little tips and wisdom and things that you've learned, because it sounds like you have just, I don't know, you've discovered a lot about yourself on your own personal journey, and you have so much more ahead of you. And I mean, being the Amanda of all trades is pretty cool. So how do you reset? I know you said painting and stuff. That's kind of your newest discovery just in terms of your self-expression. But what else do you like to do to kind of reset your mind, to kind of brew up some more creativity? Because we all have those days when we're not feeling so creative.
I'm definitely a really big consumer. I think that we kind of are living in a time where it's like, oh, I like these glasses are blue light blocking because I consume so much screen time between work and home, but it's not always a bad thing. I am so inspired by other people. I know Pinterest doesn't really it's not super popular anymore, but Pinterest is something that I am absolutely addicted to. Just like scrolling through other people's art. Whenever I'm having like an I don't know what to paint day, if I start scrolling through somebody else's paintings on their Instagram, or even just like look through my inspiration board on Pinterest where I save stuff when I was feeling super inspired, it's enough to really jog me. I've learned that I'm a super visual learner. Yeah. And so that's the way that I tend to be inspired. And sometimes for me, that's scrolling through social media, but sometimes it's also get in my car and go. I'm very much a runner. It's how I like to describe it. When I feel overwhelmed, my first instinct is to bolt. And so I tend to bolt to either places of familiarity or places I know that will calm me. I'm that person that drives to the beach in the winter just to sit in the parking lot, just to be near the ocean, or, drives up to my college. One time I was having kind of like a little crisis of self kind of weekend, and it was a gorgeous spring weekend, and I was having dinner with one of my friends who lived, less than 20 minutes away from my alma mater. So I drove there and I sat, on the lawn on a blanket in the middle of the summer when nobody was there, and, just like hung out and wrote and read a book and just reset. Sorry, Siri. And so basically was able to just mentally reset from being in a different place. And, you know, all I had to do was get in my car and drive an hour. And it's something that really helps me just to get out sometimes, you know, especially sometimes when you live where you work, like I do. Like my office was 38 steps from my apartment pre-pandemic. So I very much had that get out instinct a lot of, I'm overwhelmed with work. You know, you can't see behind you right now, but the pile of laundry is so high on the chair that you can't see the chair. And I'm like, that's stressing me out. Like, I'm going to need to move to a different room if I'm going to be able to concentrate on anything, because that pile of laundry is making me like, oh boy, later. So I know that getting out and getting to a different place can also be just as helpful as, you know, bouncing off of others. And art, I mean, there's stealing, but most of it, just like Shakespeare used to do, is just creative borrowing or creative inspiration. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using other people's work as a reference, or, you know, even like seeing a picture of a girl holding sunflowers on Pinterest. Like, I'm going to use those sunflowers as reference because it's a lot easier to look at those sunflowers to figure out which way petals fall than to try to conjure that up in my brain. Yeah. And that was something that I didn't understand until more recently. And that's why I always thought I was bad at art, because I could never just like sit down and like draw something. Mm-hmm. But when I watched somebody else do it, or watched something or looked at something, I was able to do it so much more easily. And it all made so much more sense and allowed my brain to click.
Oh, that's so good. And it's like, it's a shortcut to learning. So you're just shortening that learning curve a little bit, and it's still your own piece. It's your own creativity and energy. You're just using a reference. Mm-hmm. Awesome. I love it. You know, if we can all learn from each other's shortcuts and we can teach each other that way too. I mean, that's how we grow stronger together. So
work smarter, not harder.
That's sometimes. Right, baby. That's right. So we didn't get there just yet, but I know that you have a couple different Instagram accounts and you are a bullet journaler, which I think is so cool. Share with our listeners a little bit about the bullet journal and kind of what that is in case they don't know.
So a bullet journal is essentially like a DIY planner. It's basically what people who are obsessed with planners to the point that they decided that all the $65 planners aren't good enough for them. Me. I've had every expensive planner that there is. So if you want a review on an expensive planner, let me know. I'll tell you which ones are worth your money and which ones aren't. But I still think that buying a nice notebook for $25 and some colored pens is more worth your money than anything else. And so basically my bullet journal is a DIY planner, and it can be anything you want. It doesn't have to be artistic. Some months mine are not. Some months mine are just me writing down the days of the week and a task list, and I pick a color and I just highlight things in that color when they're done. And some months it's a complete art piece for me, and it's something, you know, I'll doodle in the margins when I'm trying to figure, you know, out a solution to a project or something. And it's essentially, the basis of bullet journaling is that it can be anything you want it to be. And I think it can be overwhelming to have an empty notebook in front of you. Sometimes it's like when you have to start writing an essay or a paper or something and you stare at the blinking cursor, but it's totally whatever you want it to be. You know, I have some colleagues who just use a black pen and a notebook, and that's all they need. And you know, if you go on Instagram or any social media, you see all these people you're like, how is this productive for you? And for me, like I said, it's kind of somewhere between productivity and an art piece. I tend to choose a theme for every month. And then I've been doing this for almost 5 years now. So I have kind of the same setup, and I don't even have to count how many spaces anymore. Like, I just can feel where the boxes go and things like that now. And so like, most bullet journalers use like a dot grid, so you can just barely see the dots just to help you draw a straight line, because God knows, they know that most people can't draw a straight line. Yeah. And it's kind of like a weird intersection of like the scrapbooking community, the art community, and the planner people. And so like, for example, daffodils are my favorite flower, and it's my birthday month in May, so I drew some daffodils for May. My sister actually gave me the idea because I didn't know what to do for May. And then I just pick a color and kind of highlight my to-dos after. So it looks complicated, but really all it is just like, I chose to draw in the middle and I put my to-do lists by day on the side. And when things are done, I cross them off. So for me, it's kind of just more of a pretty to-do list. I do have some other things that I like to keep track of in here. I keep like my yearly goals in here. I keep some travel goals. a wish list of things for like supplies for my Etsy shop that like, okay, the next big purchase I'll make will be X, but also like kind of a wish list for myself, because nothing's more annoying than when someone texts you like, what do you want for your birthday? And you're like, I haven't thought about that. My birthday's next week, and now you don't have time to buy me something, and now I'm a bad person because I'm going to make you feel bad later.
Yeah.
And so, like, oh, I really want to like buy this book or whatever. I track the books that I read just because, sometimes you'll be like, oh, I want to read a new book, or I want to start something new, and you don't know what to do. And I'm like, oh, I've been meaning to read all of these books. And just like the yearly outlook, I tend to be able to get 6 months in a journal, which works out pretty perfectly with my work schedule, because I can basically get right before a semester of the university's calendar, and then right after the semester into every journal. And that's kind of the ebb and flow of my life currently. But some people do a journal a year. Some people just start a journal. The first one I started in February. There's no like roadmap to how to do it. It's honestly, all you need is a dot grid journal and a pen, and you will be good to go. You'll learn along the way. And honestly, YouTube is one of the best resources there is for bullet journaling. It helps keep me and my brain and myself in line. I feel really at sea without a good to-do list. So it's definitely something that I can always go back to, even from a boring meeting to feeling overwhelmed with too much to do. Sometimes doodling in the margins is kind of what I need.
I love that. And yet another example of, it doesn't have to be, it started on January 1st. It doesn't have to be ended on December 31st. Start exactly where you are and do it messy. And like you said, walk away, come back, and maybe you'll love it, or you'll see a different, perspective and do something different with it. So
yeah, there's times that I use it more than others, like this time of year, I have to-do lists for my to-do lists, but in July, I don't really have a ton to do, that I need to make sure I map out. It's kind of more of like, oh, I need to finish this project by the end of the summer, or, oh, I should really clean the back office. Like, it's those type of days and those type of projects where I don't really worry about it. And, I write down like when my bills are due and just the little life things that you want to put in a planner. I kind of just shove it all into one place. Sometimes if I know I'm like losing track of something, like I have a problem with eating 3 meals a day, because for me, iced coffee is a meal, and that's not good. And I know that's not good. So I, sometimes will stick a little like checklist in there. And my sister's a first grade teacher, and she always jokes that nothing motivates people like a sticker chart.
That's true. That's true.
And so I make myself a little weekly sticker chart, and I get to put a sticker on there every time I do the thing that week or whatever. And you'd be surprised when you have to stare at it every day, how much you're like, oh, I'm kind of doing really bad here. I got to step up my game. You're like in a competition with yourself.
Totally. I completely get it in more ways than we're going to talk about at this moment. So yes, which, talking about stickers, you actually create some really cool custom stickers too in your art shop. So tell our listeners what they can, first of all, find from you from the creative world, and where they can find it.
So I do mostly hand painted and digital art at the current time. Right now, I'm really into the digital world. It's become really popular. And so I do a lot of stickers. Stickers are the big thing right now. Kind of like the glossy vinyl ones that you stick on your laptop or your water bottle or whatever the kids are doing now. Yeah. And, I know the teacher community is somebody who is a big purchaser of Amanda Cefaratti art. And so, my sister and, all her teacher friends give out stickers as like rewards to students. So I have like bulk packs of everything from, I draw my dog a lot. His name's Gunner. He's very cute and funny looking. He's a golden retriever, and random people just love looking at him because he looks like the dog from Up. And so, people love dogs. And so that's an easy one. I have done the little guys from Among Us. I've done Baby Yoda. I also do, like quotes. I have this one that says, "You can't pour from an empty cup." That's kind of my favorite one. And it's just like a pretty design, very like Instagram chic is kind of what I like to joke my style is. So those are kind of the stickers that I usually do. I did one that says, if you're a child of the 90s, you'll get this. If not, maybe not. Circle, circle, dot, dot. I just got my COVID shot, because I thought the COVID shot stickers they gave us were boring. So I had to make my own. And also mine fell off my shirt. And if you didn't get a sticker, did you get your COVID shot? Like, it's really. You didn't get a sticker, did you even vote? Like, it's like that. And so, oh, sorry, classic res life, one of my staff members calling me.
Okay.
And so essentially, like, that's kind of where I've really found my business booming, but I really cut my bread and butter in art prints. I started selling art prints of my hand painted art. And so just taking high quality, either photos or scans of them, depending on the size, and selling those. I was doing a lot of like floral kind of abstract works. And then eventually I started doing digital versions of abstract florals, which were really fun. And somehow through drawing my dog for a lot of, fun, basically, I found that people were asking me to draw their pets. And so I have drawn a lot of dogs. I've done a couple cats. I've even done a hedgehog at this point. And so custom pet portraits are kind of something like in the side niche that I have started that are really fun. I love drawing people's pets because it's so funny to see the pictures that people choose to send me. It's so cute. Like nothing makes you happy like seeing a dog with its tongue out or a cat looking at you like, what do you want? Like,
True.
It's just like pure happiness. People love their pets so much. There are children too. So it's definitely really fun. And ironically, one of my best-selling paintings year-round is a Hocus Pocus painting, because everybody truly does love Hocus Pocus.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so fun. Okay, so your Etsy shop is Amanda Cef Art,
Yes.
AmandaCefArt on Etsy, and then your Instagram account is at Amanda Cef CEF Art for our listeners.
So it's Amanda Cef _art
underscore. Ooh,
on Instagram.
Got it. Okay, very important. Cool. Well, it has been so amazing to talk to you, and I feel like I could just pick out like 5 different red bra moments just from this conversation. But when you kind of look back on your journey and all throughout your years, what is one red bra moment that really stands out to you? So when we ask our guests about a red bra moment, that is kind of like the idea. So it's the concept of you wearing that red bra, you have that inner confidence, you have that strength underneath. Some people see it, it may be showy, it may be bold, some people don't, but it's there no matter what. And when you look back, you're like, wow, that was amazing. And that's something that's going to propel me forward and I'm never going to forget. So what is a red bra moment for you?
So my red bra is actually an orange crop top.
Ew, I love it.
Yeah. And so I'm somebody who has always been, what I've now learned is like mid-size. Like I'm too small for plus size clothing usually, but a little bit like I'm usually an extra large or a large in like straight size clothing. And so it's something that I've struggled with my whole life. I found out I had polycystic ovarian syndrome, which makes weight loss very difficult, when I was actually 13 years old, which is like super young to find out you have PCOS. Shout out to my pediatrician for recognizing it in me and helping me find treatment for it at a younger age and not struggling like so many women do. And so I was always afraid to wear a crop top because I do have I hold all my weight in my stomach pretty much. I'm also 5'3", so there's not a lot of room for all that to distribute and stretch out. And so it was one of those things where it was like, I was going to a concert and I was like, it was going to be, I think 94 degrees out that day. And it was an outdoor concert. And I was like, we're getting there in the middle of the day and then we're going to eat and barbecue and whatever. And the concert will be at night. So I won't be cold because it's going to be 94 degrees out. I was like, but I can't in good conscience, like I'm going to wear jeans because I was like, I'm going to wear jeans. I want pockets, whatever. I'll wear sandals. I was like, but everybody else was wearing a crop top. Like we were in the group chat, like, what are you wearing? What are you wearing? And the pictures were coming in and I was like, I don't want to be the quote unquote fat friend in the corner who looks different than everybody else. I want to just be able to feel like I'm part of the group and feel like I can meet status quo without being self-conscious, because looking back at the pictures or, whatever, I'm probably going to feel worse the whole time. And if I don't. And so I tried on like 25 pairs of high-waisted jeans because I was like, if I wear high-waisted jeans, it's a crop top, but you can't tell. And so I was like, I will be fashionable somehow. And I just finally felt comfortable to the point that I wasn't self-conscious, because I knew that my self-consciousness would make me stick out like a sore thumb more. And I was like, if you're weird, it's only weird if you make it weird, is what I just kept telling myself. I was like, it's only weird if you make it weird. It's only weird if you make it weird. And I don't know what changed after that, but I think I discovered like a whole part of fashion that I had decided wasn't for me, that was like insanely popular at the time and still is, Like I used to go to stores and be like, why is everything a crop top? Like, why can't I buy a whole shirt? Like I felt like an old lady. And now I'm like at Target and I'm like, and that's cute and that's cute. And I'm going to try that on. And, you know, sometimes you pick things up and you're like, that doesn't look as good on me as I thought it did. And you put it back on the shelf. But now I have the confidence to even pick up those things off the shelf because I realized that I had so much fun that day. And not even for a second did I think about the fact that you could see 1.25 inches of my stomach.
That is awesome. I love it. That is an amazing Red Bra moment. Thank you so much for sharing that and giving others the confidence to go out and try something new. And even if you find it takes the first set of jeans isn't the right one, the second one isn't the third one, find what you feel freaking good
Number
in
25.
and wear it. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh, Amanda, it has been so awesome to talk to you. And like I said, you have dropped so many just gems of wisdom and insight and creativity. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Your art is beautiful. I really like the lemon canvas you have as well too, the lemon print. I think it's so awesome. But we end every one of our episodes with a quote for our guest. And the quote that I thought spoke to your story is, courage is the most important of all virtues, because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. Maya Angelou. And I think that you are such an example, a beautiful example of courage in taking that first step and doing all of these new things that are opening doors and leading you down your amazing path.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Like legitimately, I'm going to go write that down.
We'll send it to you.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. And thank you to everybody who tuned in today. I know that you're going to get something from Amanda's incredible story. If you think about a friend that could use her story in her life too, please share. That's what the stories hold so much power. And we can share them with others to inspire, lift them up, and motivate them. Please follow everything that's happening over at the Red Bra Project on Instagram. You can check out all of our episodes either in podcast form, on our blog at theredbraproject.com, or if you'd like to watch them, the visual person, you can head to our YouTube channel. So thank you guys all for being here and have a great night. Bye-bye.
Bye.